Well, hello. How is everyone doing? Today is kind of cold, it's kind of wintry. Have my good fur. It's not fur, it's all fake. Okay, so this class is about teaching grammar in terms of production. And some of you had this class online, but since we're on strike, I'm re-recording this so all of you can have the same opportunities to have the same class, okay? So just to make sure that what we're up to, last week we covered teaching speaking, right? The teaching speaking cycle, and we tried to create a teaching speaking activity. Yes, that's all good. So today we're going to, and the next topic is writing. So we have speaking in one part and writing in the other. Yes, but how do we bridge this? How do we merge both worlds? Well, a good way to see it is that we can use grammar as a way in which we can bridge both skills. Why? Because grammar is present in both, and from both we can teach grammar, okay? So let's see the PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can actually see it. Yes? Now, so I guess you're seeing my screen now. And it should be a PowerPoint presentation called grammar. So in terms of grammar, we're going to cover three types of um, grammar learning methods or grammar learning techniques. Um, can you see it? Yes. Sorry, which are deductive approach, the inductive approach, and the PACE approach. Yes, they are very simple methods. And I guess you have seen more than one before, but maybe the names haven't resonated yet. Okay. So first, we're going to start with the deductive approach. The deductive approach is the one that you probably were taught at your school, and it's probably the one that is still being taught today. So in the deductive approach, deductive means, what does deductive means? Deductive means that from a rule, from a general rule, you go into the specific. So um, you're given a rule, and therefore all the examples should follow that rule. So first, what you do is that you establish a grammatical rule. It says rules should be clear, simple, relevant, and rely on familiarity with the learner's prior knowledge. So for example, if you're teaching the most basic thing in English, which is, for example, present simple, you would say present simple is the verb plus s. So she works, he works, she plays, he plays. So you state the rule, right? So you say if it's one person, you add an s. If it's more than one person, you put the verb just as it is. Yes? Or even more simple rules. You can say when you're teaching pronouns, you can say she, ella, he, él, it, eso, we, nosotros. So you state the rule. How is the rule written? Sort of you can even write this present simple is dos puntos, and you can even define. So the first step in the deductive approach is the rule, and you give out the name. You say present simple, you say present perfect, you say past participle, you state sort of the name of the grammatical feature. Once you do that, what you do is that you teach this new feature, this grammatical feature, sort of in a mathematical way. In this way, for example, when you teach past simple, it is subject plus verb plus ed plus complement, right? So you do sort of this not a grammatical, sorry, a mathematical way in which students can sort of interchange the words. And this is done in schools up to this day. They're given sort of this mathematical rule which can be followed. So for example, if you're talking about the let's say, I don't know, continuous, you said is subject plus the verb plus ing plus the complement, right? So that mathematical rule is part of the deductive approach. So first here, you establish the rule, you try to define the rule, and then you give out this mathematical way of thinking. The first step in the deductive approach is that you don't necessarily have to translate everything, right? Because most exercises are just, okay, change subject for my mom, change subject for my dad, change subject. So you play by interchanging the parts simply. But what this does is that teachers should be proficient linguistically in both languages. So they know what the complement is in both English and Spanish. They know what the verb is in English and Spanish. They know what the direct complement is. They know, for example, what are the connector words. And they know, for example, what are the errores gramaticales. What are the ways in which I can analyze the sentence, right? So if a teacher doesn't know that in Spanish, he doesn't really know it in English neither. So if you're talking about, yes, the direct object with the direct complement, but you don't really know in Spanish, it's meaningless, right? So once you've established the rule, you establish the math, you establish that meaning or the language is not really the focus, then you go into drills and practice. So write sentences with this. Practice this word. See the mistakes in here, right? So these are not really communicative. You are sort of understanding the rule. So you state the rule, you gave the mathematical element of it, then you exercise based on drills and fill in the blanks and correct and error correction, right? So in the deductive approach, what happens is that your main focus is not the function, but rather the rule. Do students know how to construct the sentence? That is the deductive approach. So it's not focused on the function of the grammar itself. So it's not concerned on if I want to say this, what language feature do I use? But it's more on, do you know how the present simple looks and writes, right? So it's based on rules. Rules are important here. So we're going to check an example of this. Let's see if this works. It did not. You know, like, yeah, let's see this example over here. I'm going to see if I can share the audio as well. Sometimes the audio is not being shared. So share computer sound. And we're going to optimize, sorry. Yeah, there we go. So hopefully you're listening to this. And if not, the PowerPoint is sorry, the PowerPoint is on Aula, so you can check it, okay? Now, we'll see if this works, okay? Again, more, okay, let's see this.
Point for today is going to be supposed to plus the base form of the verb. The structure in English is going to be the subject, plus to be supposed to, plus the base form of the verb. Okay?
Sorry.
To express two different ideas. To express unexpected action when we are talking in simple present, and to express an expected action that didn't happen when we are referring to the simple past. These are the two tenses in which we use this expression. Okay? So, when we are in simple present, we win. Okay. And the simple past. What's the word? Only two forms. I am so.
Okay, so I think you sort of understood that, right? So we're going to back into the, yeah. So what happens here is that, as you can see, the teacher was teaching the past simple, right? So she had two sort of main parts of the class, and she stated the rules, she gave the mathematical way, and in the end the students were sort of repeating and drilling I, you, we, they, and things like that. Yes, so she stated the rule, then she gave the sort of the mathematical way, and then she sort of tied it up by providing examples and providing drills the student could practice. And if you saw this, she always used the terms, for example, past tense. She used the term function. She always named these grammatical features: subject, object, verb, right? So she was really focusing on the rules. There wasn't anything about what do I use the past simple for example. There wasn't any realistic or any real life situation in which the teacher said, oh, you can use this in these situations. Or there wasn't any context in which, for example, past simple can be used. A review, or I don't know, what happened yesterday. So it's all about the rule, right? The rule. And she had a lot of cards with a lot of symbols, a lot of words that you can sort of match and play with it. So that is the deductive approach: rule-based, mathematical-based, and drilled, non-very realistic based approach, right? So I'm going to share my screen again, because although some of you would say like, oh, you know, this sucks and this is the worst, there's still some advantages and disadvantages about this method. So let's think about the advantages. Is that it saves you time, right? It's straight to the point, and when you have to teach something very complex, such as passive voice, there's extremely huge, complex, and very step by step of the grammatical feature. You go straight to the point, and you give out the name, and you say, today we're going to teach passive voice, and passive voice is this, and you sort of save some classes, some vital classes, for the input and the preparation and background knowledge, etc., etc. Another advantage is that it acknowledges that language is something cognitive. Yes, so students think and understand information in various ways. So some students will not understand when you talk about function or use, but they have a more mathematical thinking developed, right? So, so the ones who are more linguistics or like artistic like me, we will get the meaning right away and the function. But some students need that piece of paper, or they need that rule written on the board for them to understand. So you have to also think about those students. Maybe you are one of those students that needs sort of that graphic way in which to understand grammar. And another advantage is that it allows the teacher to deal with language points that come out in the classroom. So it allows you freedom and a lot of control, because you're the one given the drills and the examples, so you can control every word. So you don't use words that they don't know or grammatical features they don't know. And since you're not really working with text or real life situations, you are the one who is in charge of giving all the input, and you can select input that they already know, right? But what are some disadvantages about this? The first disadvantage is that it is not engaging at all. If you saw the video, The one who was doing all the job all the time was the teacher. Students participated at the end of the class and they give a little drill. So it's not student-centered. Remember that always, always the focus of the class is the student. Yes, student-centered class. That's what we need to develop. And with this, it's more like a TED talk, right? So the teacher's providing a lot of input and talking a lot and saying a lot, and the students are just looking and copying. Another disadvantage is that there's a lot of concepts involved that are very, for some students, are very complex to understand. When I was at school, we would have grammar classes, and we would have what is el objeto directo, el complemento indirecto, preposiciones de lugar, de tiempo, etc., etc. But now, at least in the Chilean curriculum, things like that are not taught anymore. Like the how was it called? It was called not lexical grammatical, but it was it had a name. I don't even recall sort of the unit. And my teacher was very like focused on grammar, but grammar is not taught in the Chilean classroom. So if you're talking about the direct complement or the direct object, students will look at you like, what are you talking about? What is this? Because they don't know those highly of niche terms, right? Another disadvantage is that it's focused on the rules rather than the communication or the function. So you will have very proficient students that can fill in the blanks, but can they actually write with the present simple? Yeah, they can fill in the blanks, but can they produce something? Can they understand something with that grammatical feature? I mean, that is a question that needs to be answered. So the complete opposite from the deductive approach is the inductive approach. So inductive approach says, okay, listen to me. It's not about the rules. Don't give out the rules. Don't give out the rules. First, provide input, provide examples. Yes? So first, you expose students to the massive amount of input, which is called input floating, right? So this idea that you're a student and you're bombarded and just like floating like water surrounding you, and you cannot even escape that feature. So for example, if you're teaching present simple, what you would do is give them a lot of examples where present simple is present. Present simple is present? Wow. Where present simple is there or is part of the class, right? So they may not even notice it at first. And that's the idea. They don't notice yet, but you're constantly input floating, right? You're providing with input. So when you actually check the rule, they would say, pero esto lo vimos como hace 3 semanas. Mira, acá también, mira, si cuando el profe hizo esta actividad también habíamos visto esto. Input. So they can get used to that sort of seeing that structure or hearing that structure. So first, it's about the examples. First, examples and input. You never state, you never state, this is present simple, this is past perfect. You never state that. You first start with the example. And once you gave out input, you selected some examples. So the first step is input, right? A lot of input with the grammatical feature. So let's think about you're teaching present continuous. So a lot of input with present continuous, present continuous. Then from that input, you select some examples that you use in your input. So some examples about present continuous. The next step, once you selected some examples, is that students have to analyze, hypothesize, discover the rule about present continuous. So first input, then you select part of the input, and then you manage students to discover or hypothesize or do this co-construction of the meaning. And once they do that, then you establish the rule. Once the input is there, once you selected the sort of the sentences or the examples, once they discover the rule, then they create the rule. And this relies on learner's unconscious process, because this is how you actually teach grammar. When you were a little boy, no one taught you about, María, tú cuando te quieres presentar a alguien más, tienes que decir yo soy María, y eso se llama presente. No one taught you that, right? So it's more of an unconscious process. It involves a lot of trial and error, because some of the guesses or some of the hypotheses, that students will come up are not correct, or they will not be able to sort of identify the pattern. This is all about pattern identification. Think about that. Patterns. Students need to see that there's some patterns that are repeated throughout the class, right? So first, input, examples, discovery, then establish the rule. So let's see this video again. I don't know if it's going to work, because technology is not my fault.
Good morning. How are you?
Okay, I'm going to share now the screen. Hopefully you will hear this. If you don't hear this, just watch it on the PPT.
Thank you, and you, Miss Kelly. Fine, thank you. Today we have grammar class. We're going to make a review about something that you know already. Please help me to connect the pronouns with the verbs. Come on, Andy. I. Tell me, I. Excellent, very good. Emma. Tell me.
So I don't know if you noticed there, but yeah, I don't know if you noticed there, but the most important part here were the students. The students were doing all the job. So the students were the ones providing the examples. The teacher never gave examples. The ones who gave the examples were the students. That means that in previous classes, there was input floating. Maybe we didn't see it in this video, right? But there was input floating, and now students, what are they doing is that they are analyzing and creating examples. And once they create examples, the teacher then drilled, right? So instead of stating the rule and then drilling, first examples and then practice and then drill. And even you can see at the end of the video, she said, okay, pick up the piece of paper that's under your chair. That is a test. So they practiced after they established the rule, after they created the examples, right? So that is in which you teach this. So again, as everything in life, it has advantages and disadvantages. So what are some advantages? One is that grammar is done through discovery. And discovery is very important because it responsibilizes students into the learning. They are the ones who need to discover and hypothesize and figure out and analyze the rules, right? You're not going to give them. It doesn't matter. Oh, and by the way, did you notice that the teacher never mentioned how the structure is called? She never said this is present simple, right? She said that this is how you introduce yourself. but she never used present simple. That's because the focus of this, in the last section, the focus was on the rule, right? Rule. Here the focus is on function. What does this grammar structure serves for? What is its function, its purpose? Yes. So for example, if you're teaching past simple has a function, which is to talk about events of the past, or do a review, right? Or talk about historical events. That is the use. Yes. So try to focus on the use, on the function, not the name or the structure. So again, the advantage is that it's done through discovery, and it responsibilizes students into their own discovery. The second advantage is that it favors pattern recognition and what is there in common within certain grammatical features. So it's not about the rule, it's about a pattern, something that looks similar, that and that's a more of an unconscious process. You know, I know there's something here that makes sense, that makes meaning. Let me search it in my brain. That's pattern making. And it involves a lot more cognitive depth, because it's not about remembering, it's about recognizing patterns. It's much deeper than that. And it develops autonomy, because after a while, students will not need the teacher to tell them the rule. They will be able to sort of discover rules when they see it, right? They will discover patterns just within practice. Now, in terms of disadvantages or shortcomings, is that it might mislead learners to believe that discovering the rule is sort of the goal, and so in that once I discovered the pattern, oh yeah, entonces el pasado es el verbo mae de listo, la clase está lista. No, the focus, you did an important step, but you need to put this into practice. So discovering the rule is not the goal. The goal is the practice, right? And also can be very time consuming for the teacher, because you have to provide input and select the examples, and the students have to come up with ideas and hypotheses on what this means or the use, right? And also another disadvantage is that some rules are very complex for them to discover by themselves, and or it might take them a lot of cognitive strength to sort of discover some patterns. So for example, if you're a student in high school, you are always taught that the rule is I was, you were, she was, they were, etc., etc., etc. But when you go to college, you discover that in the subjunctive way, it's not if I was, it's if I were. You were taught all your high school that the correct way was if I was. And then you go to college and you discover it can also be if I were. So that level of complexity may frustrate students when they actually have something very, very, very attached to their brains, to their knowledge, and then they have to break it, or they have to keep on adding things. That might be complex for them, okay? Now, the third model is called PACE, PACE. And it's basically a branch of inductive approach, yes? So it stands for presentation, attention, co-construction, and extension. So what in this case, what the teacher does is that first, the teacher sort of presents the grammar in a contextualized manner. So stories, legend, poems, pieces of news, stories, etc., etc. Then the teacher and the student collaborate and co-construct grammar explanation. So what the teacher does is that he creates questions and prompts questions that make students understand that there's something here, right, that we need to understand. And then they use the grammar this new grammar feature in a more obvious and like meaning and functional way. So what is different from the other approach, from the inductive approach, is that here is more of a co-construction. The teachers also involved into the discovery of this theory, right? So the teacher is the one who says like, so is the sentence in past, in present, or in future? How do you know this? Oh, let's mark it. Oh yeah, let's see this. But what about this word? Yeah, so they co-construct the rule. About PACE. First, there's presentation of meaningful language. So you present legend, adapted text, or any input that is important, right? And the grammatical feature should appear very often in that text or in that story or in that real life task. So if you're teaching, for example, I don't know, connectors, and you're teaching the connector, so the text that you present should have at least 10 or 15 words so. Then you assist the students with the comprehension of the meaning. And this should be interactive. So it should be a pinpointing of question, answer, question, answer. What does it say here? Why is he using this word? How many times is this word repeated, etc., etc. So if you're seeing, if you're covering again present simple, you would say, okay, how many verbs are there? What is there with common with all the verbs? And students say they all have s at the end. Do all have s at the end? No, some of them don't have an s, and those are the kind of questions that you have to prompt. And this section can be carried out as one part of the class or the entire class or many classes. It depends up to you, right? Then you draw attention to those features, and here highlighting or circle the grammatical feature is the best way. So again, you have this this text, right? And once you analyzed with the students, you say, okay, now highlight this. So in this case, what the teacher is trying to teach is past. So they probably the teacher ask them to underline all the ed forms: hired, listened, returned, learned, and also the was or the were. So you can give them actions: highlight this, circle this, look for this. So students can then come up with a rule. And the idea is that as you go, they notice these are certain aspects, differences, or repeated words, and they see this pattern. And then you co-construct. So they have highlighted, right? They have analyzed the text. And here are some words. For example, what do all the red words have in common? What did Merlin do? What did Arthur do? How are they different from the actions in blue? What do they want to express? So you prompt questions for make them realize that one, it is past. Two, if I want to put a verb into past, I add ed. Three, there are some verbs that don't finish in ed. Yes, so they're regulars and irregulars. So you should have, you as a teacher, have to come up with questions that make students realize these rules. And then you co-construct with the students with what the students have answered and provided you, you give out the rule. And then there's extension. So extension is basically put into practice this new grammar skill, into writing, into speaking, into creating sentences, and you integrate the new skill or this new grammatical feature with previous. So for example, something that happens in every school is that once they teach present perfect, they go back to present simple to see sort of their differences, right? So you integrate both. Now, so I'm going to show you an example of this. This was one of my classes that I did when I was a teacher. Let's see if I have it here. So is this text, it should open anytime. Okay, I haven't paid for Word, which is cool, you know. And I want to search for the PPT. Let's go Keith Haring, I guess. I'm talking by myself right here. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so this is an example of a class that I taught. And what I had to teach was present perfect in Primero Medio and in Unit 3, which is about art. So what I would do is I would say, okay, kids, today we're going to talk about Keith Haring. I never said that we're going to learn about present perfect. Yes? So am I using inductive or deductive? If I never talked about the grammatical feature. So I state the objective. The objective is to understand general information from a text. Again, I'm not stating any grammatical feature. I'm hiding it. Yes? So this is the overall objective, but there's a grammatical feature that we'll understand through this objective. So I present Keith Haring as an iconic artist. You know him. I mean, come on. So I show them a video. So this section is the input floating. You make them engage with the content and engage with the topic or engage with the grammar, etc., etc. And you still are engaging. And then slowly you go into the grammar. So it said we will read some sentences about Keith Haring's life. Try to see if those sentences have something in common. Okay, so here are the sentences. Keith Haring has turned into one of the most important American artists. Keith Haring has changed the perception of street art. Keith Haring has collaborated with many other artists. So in this text, as it says here, in this section, students are the ones who discover the features in common. You only provide with guiding questions. Students should be the ones who underline or circle either on the board or on their notebooks, the question, which is what is there in common. So I would say, as a teacher, okay, class, what does it say in sentence number 1? Keith Haring has turned into one of the most important American artists. So someone would say, que Keith Haring es como un artista americano súper importante. I say, good kids. Okay, second one, Keith Haring has changed the perception of street art. Que Keith Haring, algo con la percepción del arte callejero, como que tiene algo con arte callejero. Good. Then I would say, okay, students, number 3, Keith Haring has collaborated. Que colaboró con muchos artistas, blah, blah. So that's what students will respond. And I would say, first, tell me, what is there in common? So students would have to say, oh, teacher, all the sentences have the word has. And I would tell them, okay, underline the word has in your notebook. And I will ask again, does someone else notice something in common? And someone would say, oh, teacher, look, all of the verbs finish in ed. And I'll say, very, very good. Yes. So second prompting question. Then I would ask, okay, is there anything more common? And students will say, yes, teacher, all of the sentences are about Keith Haring, Keith Haring, Keith Haring. Oh, and I would say, oh yeah, so they're talking about Keith Haring's life or Keith Haring's experience. Yes, those are the 3 things in common. So I would say, okay. And I would always also say, so are these sentences in past, in present, or in future? And then students would get confused because they would be like, oh, I don't know. They would say, profe, está en pasado porque tiene el ed. But I would say, but it also has a has. So we would go, oh, sí, verdad. No, está en futuro. I would say it can be in future because Keith Haring is dead. It can be in present either. So you prompt some question. Okay, so then what you do is that you sort of summarize all of those findings. These are the findings that or the patterns that students found. First, they all talk about someone's life experience. 2, they all have the word has. 3, the verbs finish in ed. So here you do a summary of what they found, what the students found with your help, with your questions. And then you create the rule. Once you input floating, you analyzed the sentences, you highlight it, you ask questions, now you come up with a rule. So you say, when I talk about someone's experiences, I use has plus verb plus ed. Then you give out the rule. In the old method, what you would do is that you would give the rule first and then the examples, right? But this is the other way around. Once you analyze, once students have hypothesized about it, once they truly underline and saw the pattern, then you co-construct the rule. So you state, okay, students, if I want to talk about someone's life experience, I use has plus a verb in ed. So for example, and then you give out other examples that help you to reassure this rule. Has converted, ha convertido. Has changed, ha cambiado. Has collaborated, ha colaborado. And here you can name the rule. Here you can tell them that it's present perfect. It's not the aim. You can do it, right? But you can do it at the end. Don't ever do it in the beginning, because if you go to a class and you say, okay, students, today we're going to study the present perfect, they'll say, boring, who cares, get away. But if you do it at the end, they will say, esto tiene un nombre, se llama presente perfecto. And in their minds, they will say, okay, entonces si yo quiero hablar de la experiencia de alguien, como por ejemplo, no sé, él ha ido a Estados Unidos, él ha comido pizza, voy a usar el has más el ed, y eso se llama presente perfecto. They are the ones who like doing that work in their brains. And then you go into the reading. Do you remember that we needed a lot of input, and the input had to have those features? So think about this. Well, I'm going to show you the reading. So it says, take a look at the title. What could it be about? Find all cognates. This is the pre-reading. Search on the dictionary, internet 10 words you don't know. Search all present perfect forms. So we studied present perfect. We analyzed the sentences. We summarized our findings. We gave out the rule. We gave more examples. And then I try to find those examples in a real text, right? So let's see the worksheet, because the worksheet also needs to have present perfect. Why? Because I am input floating. I'm providing with all the chances for students to really check and understand the rule they just created. So for example, New York subway street culture has inspired, present perfect. Yes. So Keith Haring has used. Students have to look for this. Okay, it was part of the instructions. So let's see. NYPD has ticketed and has arrested. So this is input floating. You provide with texts or audios that have a lot of the grammatical feature you just taught. And this is how you teach it. And even some of the questions have present perfect. And then you can create sort of a chart for them to understand. But as you can see, this is my present perfect class. I started with examples, analyzed the examples, analyzed the pattern, established the rule, and then I practiced. Yes? And that is how grammar should be taught, because now students know that if I talk about someone's experience, I use this structure. While if I use the old method, they would only know the rule. Has más verbo más ed. But here they know the use, the function, they use the structure. They were the ones who created the hypothesis. They were the ones who discovered the patterns. They are the ones who have a text, and they are the ones who need to underline and understand the text that has a grammatical feature. And you can do this with every single grammar feature, from tenses to vocabulary to more like extremely complex things such as, I don't know, again, passive voice. So this is how you teach grammar. There were 3 ways. I always suggest you to do it in I always suggest you to do it in that way. Okay. So that was the class. Yeah,